He never yelled. He never hit anyone. He believed good fathers stayed calm, stayed quiet, stayed out of trouble. And that belief is what destroyed his family. Evan Miller lived on a street where nothing ever happened. Not the kind of nothing that felt empty, more like the kind people paid extra for. A cul-de-sac tucked behind a row of maples, where the sidewalk stayed clean and the mailboxes all matched. Every driveway held the same calm symbols of stability. A minivan, a sedan, a neatly parked SUV. The lawns were cut on schedule, stripes running straight as if the neighborhood itself had standards. In the mornings, there were the same small rituals. A garage door rolling up, a coffee mug lifted in a silent greeting, a polite nod exchanged without slowing down. No one asked too many questions. No one raised their voice. Even the dogs seemed trained to bark only briefly, as if prolonged noise would be considered rude. Evan fit into it the way a key fits into a lock. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He didn't have the kind of job that came with impressive stories at parties. He worked in logistics for a regional supply company, a position that involved spreadsheets, shipping schedules, and making sure things arrived where they were supposed to arrive. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable. Evan liked that. Every 2 weeks, the direct deposit hit like clockwork. Every year, he filed his taxes early. He didn't cheat. He didn't gamble. He didn't drink too much. He wasn't a risk in any sense of the word. His life was built on predictable outcomes. And in his mind, predictability was the closest thing to safety a man could earn. On weekends, he coached his daughter Lily's soccer team. Not because he dreamed of trophies, he wasn't that kind of dad, but because he believed being present mattered. He showed up early with a bag of cones and a clipboard he barely used. He handed out orange slices after games. He reminded the kids to hydrate. He clapped at the right moments and kept his voice measured even when parents yelled from the sidelines. Other dads saw him and nodded approvingly. Other moms smiled politely. He was the kind of father people trusted automatically, the kind they assumed would return a lost wallet, the kind who looked like he belonged in a family insurance commercial. People described him the same way every time. Nice guy, mind his own business, solid family man. Evan heard those words and felt something like relief. Not pride exactly, relief. Because in a world where things could go wrong for no reason, being considered solid felt like armor. At work, Evan kept his head down. He was helpful without being involved, friendly without being close. He stayed out of office politics like a man avoiding wet cement. If someone wanted to vent about a manager, Evan listened but didn't add fuel. If someone tried to pull him into gossip, he smiled and redirected the conversation. He didn't take sides. He didn't need to. His life was already full. The mortgage, the car payment, the school schedule, the grocery list, the little repairs around the house that seemed to multiply every season. He had enough responsibility without taking on anyone else's drama. And that mindset carried into his marriage too. Claire used to tease him in the early years, back when teasing still had warmth in it. "You're too quiet sometimes," she would say, leaning against the kitchen doorway while he loaded the dishwasher with calm precision. Evan would smile, rinse a plate, and pretend the comment didn't land anywhere sensitive. He told himself Claire liked his quiet, that it balanced her, that it made him stable. Claire was sharper, more intuitive. She noticed things Evan didn't want to notice. She asked questions Evan didn't want to answer. She had the kind of emotional honesty that made Evan uncomfortable, like standing too close to a mirror. But she also had a laugh that filled rooms, a way of making their home feel alive. She remembered birthdays, tracked school deadlines, kept the pantry stocked, and somehow managed to do it without making it look like work. Evan admired that. He also relied on it. Their house ran smoothly, and Evan convinced himself that smoothness was proof they were doing things right. On weekday evenings, he came home, kissed Claire, asked Lily how practice went, and listened for the normal signs of a good life, the hum of the refrigerator, The clink of dishes, the distant sound of a show playing in the living room. He liked the quiet, not because he didn't care, not because he was cold, but because quiet meant nothing was breaking. Quiet meant there wasn't a problem he couldn't fix with a calm tone and a responsible decision. Quiet meant the world hadn't found a way into their home. Even when Claire said, "You're too quiet sometimes," Evan still smiled. Because in his mind, quiet wasn't weakness. Quiet was discipline. Quiet was maturity. Quiet was what kept families intact. Quiet meant safe. It started at his daughter Lily's middle school. Not with a phone call from the principal. Not with a note sent home in a backpack. Not with tears or bruises or anything that looked urgent enough to force action. It started quietly, the way most serious things do. Evan was sitting at the kitchen counter when his phone vibrated. Just another notification in a long chain of daily interruptions emails, reminders, neighborhood updates, automated alerts that blurred together after a while. He almost ignored it. But the screen lit up with the name of the neighborhood parent group chat. He tapped it absent-mindedly, expecting the usual, someone complaining about parking, a reminder about trash pickup, a blurry photo of a missing cat. Instead, there was a video, short, no caption, just a thumbnail frozen mid-motion. Evan frowned and pressed play. At first, he didn't recognize what he was seeing. A school hallway, lockers lining the walls, a cluster of kids standing too close together, the camera shaking slightly, held by someone who found the moment entertaining. Then the image shifted, and Evan saw her, Lily, his daughter. She stood in the center of the frame, backpack hanging from one shoulder, arms stiff at her sides. Her face wasn't twisted with fear or pain. There were no tears, no dramatic reactions. That was what made it worse. She looked empty. Around her, other kids moved in and out of the shot. Someone laughed sharp, careless. Someone said her name, drawn out in a way that turned it into something ugly. Another voice mocked her shoes. Another repeated a rumor Evan didn't understand. The camera zoomed in. Lily didn't respond. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't push anyone away. She just stood there, frozen, like her body had decided it was safer not to move. Evan felt his chest tighten, but the feeling didn't explode into panic the way movies promised it would. It settled instead, heavy and uncomfortable, like a weight placed carefully on his ribs. He watched the video to the end. Then he watched it again. This time he noticed details he had missed before. The way Lily's fingers curled slightly into her sleeves. The way her eyes flicked once toward the floor, then stopped moving altogether. The way no adult appeared in the frame, not even in the background. When the video ended a second time, Evan locked his phone and set it face down on the counter. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The clock above the stove ticked forward with steady indifference. Outside, a lawn sprinkler clicked on somewhere down the street. Life continued, uninterrupted. The group chat, however, did not. Messages appeared one after another. Kids these days, they're all on their phones anyway. Middle school is rough, builds character. Don't overreact. That's how things get worse. My son went through something similar. He's fine now. Evan read every message. He didn't type anything. He told himself he was processing, that he needed time to think, that reacting too quickly would only make things messy. Claire wasn't home yet. Lily was still at soccer practice. There was no immediate crisis to respond to, no screaming child, no emergency room visit, just a video. And a feeling Evan didn't know what to do with. He picked up his phone again, hovered his thumb over the screen, as if he might say something, anything to the group. But the messages kept coming, each one softening the situation, sanding down its edges. Don't make it worse. Kids forget these things. Schools handle this kind of stuff. Evan exhaled slowly. He told himself the other parents knew what they were talking about, that they had more experience, that they wouldn't all be wrong. He reminded himself of everything he believed, that attention could amplify problems, That confrontation created enemies. That staying calm kept families safe. He imagined calling the school, demanding answers, starting a chain reaction he couldn't control. Meetings, labels, awkwardness. Lily being singled out even more. No, better to wait. Better to observe. Better not to turn a moment into a crisis. When Lily came home that evening, she looked normal. Tired, hungry, quiet. Evan watched her carefully as she dropped her backpack by the door and kicked off her shoes. He searched her face for signs of distress, red eyes, trembling hands, anything obvious enough to justify intervention. There was nothing. She ate dinner without complaint. She answered questions with short, polite responses. She smiled once, briefly, when Claire told a joke. Evan told himself that meant something. That meant she was okay. That meant the video hadn't damaged her the way he feared. That meant his instincts were right. Later that night, Evan lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the house settled around him. His phone sat on the nightstand, silent now, the group chat finally exhausted of opinions. He replayed the video once more in his mind. Not the laughter. Not the voices. Just Lily standing there, still. He turned onto his side and closed his eyes. It'll pass, he told himself. And for the first time in his life, Evan Miller mistook hope for wisdom. Dinner became quieter, not all at once. Not in a way you could point to and say, this is when it changed. It happened the way a room cools after the heat shuts off slowly, almost politely, until one day you realize you're cold and you don't remember when warmth left. At first, it was little things. Lily stopped telling stories from school. She used to narrate her day in fragments, who said what in math class, how a teacher mispronounced someone's name, which kid tripped in the hallway and pretended not to care. Evan would half listen while cutting chicken, nodding at the right moments. Now she ate with her eyes on her plate. Fork to mouth, chew, swallow, repeat. Claire asked questions anyway, because Claire always asked. How was practice? Any homework? Who'd you sit with at lunch? Lily answered, but her voice stayed flat, like she'd learned that emotion was too risky to reveal. Fine, not much. Same people. Then she would stand up, rinse her plate without being asked, and disappear upstairs before the rest of the meal had even settled. It wasn't dramatic. Lily wasn't slamming doors or screaming that she hated them. She was doing something far more unsettling. She was erasing herself. Soon, other habits vanished too. Lily stopped asking to go to school events. The dances, the games, the club nights that kids usually begged their parents for, she stopped mentioning them entirely. When flyers came home in her backpack, they stayed folded and forgotten at the bottom like trash. She stopped inviting friends over. There had once been laughter in their living room, girls sprawled on the rug. Movie nights, bowls of popcorn, the chaotic sound of teenage voices blending together. Evan used to find it mildly annoying and secretly comforting, proof that Lily was normal, social, safe. Now the house stayed quiet. On weekends, Lily stayed in her room. If Claire suggested they go shopping, Lily said she was tired. If Evan offered to take her for ice cream, she said she wasn't hungry. She wasn't angry. That would have been easier. Anger was loud. Anger was visible. Anger gave you something to respond to. This was different. This was a controlled retreat. Evan noticed, of course. He wasn't blind. But every time he thought about stepping in, his mind offered him reasonable excuses, each one shaped like a life raft. It's a phase. Teenagers are moody. Don't push too hard or she'll pull away more. Let Claire handle it, she's better at this. Don't make it a bigger thing. And on the surface, nothing forced him to contradict those thoughts. Lily still went to school. She still got decent grades. She still showed up for soccer practice. She still said good night when Claire reminded her. Everything looked functional. Evan clung to that. One night, Claire waited until Lily had gone upstairs and the dishwasher was humming before she brought it up again. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the small light above the stove. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. the kind of quiet Evan used to find comforting. The porch lights down the street glowed like distant candles. Claire stood at the sink, hands resting on the counter, not washing dishes, just holding still. Evan sat at the table with his phone in his hand, scrolling without absorbing. Claire didn't start with accusation. She started with a question. Did you see the video? Evan's thumb stopped mid-scroll. He looked up, just briefly, then nodded. Yes. Claire's face didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. She waited. Evan knew that pause. Claire had a way of waiting that wasn't silence, it was pressure. It was space designed to force truth into it. So Evan filled it with the safest thing he could offer. I don't want to escalate things, he said. He tried to make it sound reasonable, like a thoughtful decision, like the kind of calm leadership fathers were supposed to have. Claire turned from the sink and faced him fully. For a moment, she didn't speak. She just looked at him, and Evan felt strangely exposed, like she could see through every explanation he had rehearsed in his head. Escalate, she repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. Evan shifted in his chair. Claire's voice stayed quiet, but there was something sharp underneath it. Evan, do you hear yourself? He frowned. What do you mean? Claire walked closer, stopping at the edge of the table. Her hands stayed relaxed, but her posture was steady anchored. You saw our daughter in a video, she said, surrounded by kids laughing at her, filming her. And your response is you don't want to escalate. Evan's jaw tightened. It's middle school, he said. Kids do stupid stuff. If we make a big deal out of it, it could what? Claire cut in, still controlled. Make her more of a target? Evan hesitated, because yes. That was exactly what he feared. Claire nodded slightly, like she'd read his thoughts. So we do nothing, she said, and hope it stops on its own. Evan leaned back, trying to keep his voice level. I'm not saying do nothing, I'm saying we don't need to storm the school and start a war. Claire's mouth tightened. Not in anger, something closer to disappointment. A war, she echoed. Evan, this isn't a war. This is our kid. Evan rubbed the side of his face, a small gesture of fatigue that was also a shield. Claire wasn't done. Do you know what Lily told me yesterday? She asked. Evan looked up. What? Claire swallowed, as if the words tasted bitter. She asked if she could eat lunch in the library from now on, Claire said. Because it's quieter. Evan felt a flicker of alarm. The library. Quiet. Isolation disguised as preference. She said it like it was nothing, Claire continued. Like she was asking permission to change toothpaste. Do you know what that means? Evan tried to answer, but nothing came quickly enough. Claire's voice softened just slightly, and that softness was worse than anger. It means she's adapting, she said. Not healing, adapting. Evan felt the urge to defend himself again, to find the reasonable angle, the calm explanation that would return them to normal. We don't even know what's going on, he said. A video doesn't tell the whole story. Claire stared at him. Then she let out a small laugh, dry, humorless. Right, she said. We don't know what's going on. Because we haven't asked. Evan opened his mouth, then closed it. Claire leaned closer, eyes locked on him. You keep saying you don't want to escalate, she said. But what you really mean is you don't want to be uncomfortable. The sentence landed with a quiet finality. Evan felt heat rise in his chest, not rage, but shame mixed with defensiveness. He wanted to reject the accusation. He wanted to say, that's not fair. He wanted to list all the things he did do, the coaching, the paying bills, the showing up, the stable life he had built. But Claire wasn't accusing him of being absent. She was accusing him of being passive. And the worst part was he couldn't immediately prove her wrong. Evan looked down at the table, at the grain in the wood, at the faint scratches from years of normal family meals. He thought about Lily upstairs, behind a closed door, living in a silence she hadn't chosen. He thought about the group chat full of parents telling each other not to react, not to make it worse, not to stir the water. He thought about his own instincts, the way his mind had rushed to protect calm the moment danger appeared. Claire waited. Evan's throat tightened. He could say something. He could promise action. He could suggest a meeting with the school, call the counselor back, sit Lily down and ask hard questions. He could do any of it. But he didn't. Because Claire was right. Saying something meant stepping into discomfort. It meant risking conflict. It meant admitting he might have been wrong. And in that moment, Evan Miller found the thing he feared more than bullying, more than gossip, more than the mess of other people's problems. He feared the rupture of his own comfort. Claire's eyes stayed on him, steady and unblinking. Evan didn't answer. Weeks passed. Not in dramatic jumps, not marked by meetings or urgent emails or sudden intervention. They passed quietly, the way time often does when nothing forces it to stop and explain itself. No teacher called, no counselor followed up, no administrator asked for a meeting. On paper, there was no crisis, because no parent had officially complained, and no parent complained because no one else was. Silence didn't just linger, it organized itself. It became the unspoken agreement everyone seemed to understand without ever stating out loud. If no one named the problem, then the problem technically didn't exist. And if it didn't exist, no one had to take responsibility for it. Evan felt that agreement settle around him like a familiar coat. Each morning, Lily went to school. She put on her backpack, tied her shoes, and left the house without protest. She didn't ask to stay home. She didn't ask for help. She simply complied. That compliance fooled people. It fooled teachers into thinking she was fine. It fooled administrators into thinking there was nothing to investigate. And it fooled Evan into believing that waiting was still an option. The video stopped circulating. New topics replaced it in the parent group chat: fundraisers, weather alerts, complaints about traffic during pickup. The outrage evaporated the way it always did, replaced by more convenient distractions. Evan watched it happen and felt a strange, guilty relief. No more notifications, no more decisions to make. No more moments that demanded he choose between comfort and confrontation. At home, Claire grew quieter. She still did the things that needed doing: meals, appointments, reminders. But she stopped pushing Evan. She stopped asking what he planned to do next. That silence should have worried him more than anger ever could. But Evan told himself it meant she was accepting reality. That she understood things took time. That maybe she'd been overreacting at first. He didn't notice how often Lily stayed in her room now. How she avoided the living room when guests came over. How she flinched at laughter coming from a phone speaker. Or maybe he noticed and filed those details away in the same mental drawer, labeled later. The school meeting happened on a Wednesday evening. It was listed as a general parent forum, nothing urgent, nothing alarming. Just an opportunity, the email said, to discuss community concerns and reinforce a positive school environment. Evan almost didn't go, but Claire insisted. Not forcefully. Just with a look that said this was one of those moments that mattered. The cafeteria smelled like disinfectant and old food. Folding chairs were arranged in uneven rows. Parents clustered in small groups, voices low, polite. Familiar faces from the neighborhood. People Evan waved to every morning without knowing very well. He took a seat near the back. That felt right. The back was safe, observational, non-committal. As the meeting started, administrators spoke in careful language. They talked about inclusivity, about respect, about policies already in place. Every sentence sounded reassuring, designed to smooth rather than stir. Evan listened, arms crossed loosely, nodding when others nodded. Then he saw them. The parents of the kids in the video. They sat near the front, close enough to be seen but not singled out. Clean clothes, calm expressions, no defensiveness, no visible guilt. They didn't look angry. They didn't look cruel. They looked normal, relieved even. Relieved that no one was saying names. Relieved that no one was pointing. Relieved that the room was filled with vague language instead of accountability. Evan recognized the feeling immediately. It was the same relief he'd felt when the group chat moved on. The same relief he'd felt every day Lily came home without visible injuries. The same relief that came from knowing no one was demanding anything from him. When the floor opened for questions, a few parents spoke up. They asked about parking, about test scores, about after-school programs. No one mentioned the video. No one mentioned bullying. No one mentioned Lily. Evan felt his heart rate slow with each passing second. This was working, his instincts told him. This was what keeping things calm looked like. The system was handling it. The community was stable. And stability, he had always believed, was proof of success. As the meeting wrapped up, parents stood and gathered their coats. Conversations resumed easily. Laughter bubbled up in small pockets. People made plans for the weekend. Evan rose with the crowd, blending back into it the way he always had. On his way out, one of the parents from the front row caught his eye and nodded at him. Just a brief acknowledgement. No words exchanged. Evan nodded back. In that small, silent exchange, he understood something with uncomfortable clarity. No one was going to step forward. Not because they didn't see what was happening. Not because they didn't care at all. But because everyone was waiting for someone else to move first. And by staying quiet, by choosing not to speak, not to act, not to name the problem, Evan had shown them exactly how to behave. He hadn't just followed the silence. He had modeled it. The parents of the kids in the video didn't look like villains. They looked relieved. Relieved that no one was pointing at them. Just like Evan, it happened on a Tuesday night. Not on a night that felt cursed or unusual. Not on a night where the sky cracked open with thunder like a warning. It was ordinary quiet, routine, forgettable. The kind of night Evan would have described as fine if someone asked. Dinner had been uneventful. Lily picked at her food, said she wasn't hungry, and slipped upstairs early. Evan watched her go the way he'd watched her for weeks, carefully, quietly, like observing from a distance might count as parenting. Claire cleaned the kitchen with sharp, efficient movements. The clink of dishes and the hum of the dishwasher filled the spaces where conversation should have been. Evan sat on the couch with the television on, volume low. A sitcom laugh track floated through the room like something artificial and far away. He scrolled his phone without reading. He told himself they were tired, that tomorrow would be better. That this phase, whatever it was, would move on. Then the house went still in a different way. Not the normal end-of-day stillness. Not the comforting hush that came after lights went out. This was silence with pressure behind it, like the air was holding its breath. Claire noticed first. She glanced up from the hallway, head tilted slightly. "Lily?" she called. No answer. A minute passed. Then another. Claire stood and walked toward the staircase. Evan stayed where he was, still looking at his phone, as if the screen could shield him from whatever was about to happen. Claire called again, louder. "Lily?" Still nothing. Evan finally set his phone down. "What?" he asked, trying to sound calm. Claire didn't reply. She was already moving upstairs. Evan followed, slower, a beat behind. He heard Claire's footsteps stop at the top landing. Heard her voice, quieter now, tightened with worry. "The bathroom door is locked." Evan's stomach dropped, cold and immediate. Claire knocked once, then twice, then harder. "Lily, open the door." "Lily, talk to me." No response. The house held its breath. Evan stepped closer, suddenly aware of how loud his own heartbeat was. The bathroom door looked normal, plain white paint, brass knob, but something about it felt wrong, like a boundary they should have crossed earlier. Claire tried the handle again, harder. "Lily." Still nothing. Evan's mind began offering explanations, frantic and useless. Maybe she fell asleep in the bath. Maybe she has headphones on. Maybe she's ignoring us. But Claire's face had changed. All softness was gone. Her eyes were wide, sharp, focused. "This is too long," she whispered. Evan moved automatically now. He grabbed the small toolkit from the closet down the hall, something he hadn't opened in months. His hands shook as he fumbled with the latch. Claire stepped back, still knocking, voice breaking into something raw. "Lily, please open the door." Evan worked at the lock, breath shallow. A screw turned. A piece loosened. It felt impossible that the world could still follow normal physics while his family was breaking. When the lock finally gave, the door swung inward with a soft, ordinary sound, and Lily was on the floor. For a second, Evan didn't understand what he was seeing. Her hair was damp, clinging to her cheek. Her skin looked pale under the harsh bathroom light. One arm was folded awkwardly beneath her. The bath mat was bunched under her shoulder, like someone had tried to hold on to something and failed. Claire made a sound Evan would never forget, half sob, half scream, like her body couldn't decide which to be. "Lily." She dropped to her knees instantly, shaking Lily's shoulder gently, then harder, panic rising. "Lily, baby, wake up, wake up." Evan stood frozen in the doorway for a fraction of a second too long. Then he moved. He knelt beside them, fingers reaching for Lily's wrist, searching for a pulse the way people do in movies when they don't know what else to do. His hands felt clumsy, useless. He could hear Claire's breathing fast and jagged like she was pulling air through fear. Evan found it. A pulse. Weak, but there. Alive, but barely. Claire called 911 with trembling fingers. Evan pressed a towel against Lily's forehead, not because it helped, but because he needed his hands to be doing something, anything, other than shaking. Minutes stretched into years before the paramedics arrived. The hallway filled with voices and movement. Boots on carpet. A stretcher. Medical terms spoken quickly. Lights flashing outside that painted their family photos in brief bursts of blue and red. Evan followed the stretcher to the ambulance like a man walking behind his own life. At the hospital, time lost its shape. There were forms, questions, bright hallways. The smell of antiseptic. The sound of machines that beeped with indifferent steadiness. Claire's face looked drained of color, as if the fear had taken it all. Lily was placed in a room where wires ran from her body like threads anchoring her to the world. She didn't open her eyes. Evan sat beside the bed, holding her hand. It was smaller than he remembered. Cold at first, then warming slowly against his palm. He stared at her fingers, nails bitten short, faint pen marks on the side from school notes, and felt a pressure build behind his eyes that never turned into tears. Tears would have been too simple. Too clean. Claire stood on the other side of the bed, one hand pressed over her mouth, the other gripping the railing like she needed something solid to keep her upright. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Claire leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't we do anything?" The words were not shouted. They weren't meant to punish him. They were meant to locate reality. Evan stared at Lily's face, still, quiet, fragile, waiting for something to change. Waiting for her to wake up, to breathe differently, to prove this wasn't real. But nothing changed. Claire asked again, softer now, as if she was speaking to God or to herself. "Why didn't we do anything?" Evan opened his mouth. No sound came out. Because what answer existed that didn't destroy him? He could say he didn't want to escalate. He could say he didn't want to make it worse. He could say he thought it would pass. All of it sounded hollow now, the way excuses always do when consequences arrive. The truth was simple, brutal, and undeniable. He hadn't stayed silent to protect his daughter. He stayed silent to protect himself. The school issued statements. They arrived in Evan's inbox like polished stones, smooth, careful, impossible to hold on to. The subject lines were urgent and formal. Community update. Student safety notice. We are committed to a supportive environment. Inside, the words were clean. The administration expressed concern. The staff was reviewing procedures. The school did not tolerate harassment. Resources were available. Counseling was offered. Meetings could be scheduled. There were no names, no clear admissions. No acknowledgement that adults had watched the water boil and called it warm. The district promised reviews. They promised committees. They promised evaluations. They promised a comprehensive assessment of school culture. Evan read every message with the same numb attention a man gives to a medical chart. The words were meant to reassure, to calm panic, to keep the public from demanding something too specific. But Evan didn't feel calm. He felt late. Parents suddenly found their voices. The neighborhood group chat, once full of dismissive comments and soothing advice, transformed overnight into outrage. The same people who had said kids these days were now typing paragraphs, posting screenshots, tagging administrators, calling for accountability. You should have done more. How could this happen? Protect our children. This is unacceptable. Evan watched the flood of anger with a bitterness he couldn't name. Not because the anger was wrong. Because it was easy now. It was easy to be brave when the story already had a victim everyone could see. Easy to demand change when the consequences had already arrived in an ambulance. Too late. Lily remained in recovery. The doctors didn't call it a miracle. They called it a process. They spoke in cautious language about healing, about therapy, about rebuilding trust and stability in a nervous system that had lived too long in fear. Evan visited when Claire let him. He sat in hospital chairs and later in therapy waiting rooms, listening to words like trauma and resilience and long-term effects. Words that sounded clinical until he saw their meaning in his daughter's eyes. Lily didn't talk much. When she did, it was small and careful, as if every sentence had to be tested for safety before it could leave her mouth. She flinched at sudden laughter. She startled at footsteps behind her. She asked to sit near exits in public places. The world had become a room she didn't trust. And Evan couldn't blame her. At home, the air between Evan and Claire grew thinner. They didn't fight. That would have required energy. Fighting would have meant they still believed something could be argued back into place. Instead, they spoke in logistics, appointments, insurance forms, medication schedules, therapy times. The pieces of life that had to be managed even when love felt strained. Evan tried, in his own way. He offered to call the school. He offered to attend meetings. He offered to sit in every therapy session if it helped. Claire listened to his offers with a face that looked older than it had a month ago. One night, after Lily fell asleep, Claire sat at the kitchen table and stared at her hands for a long time. Evan stood across from her, unsure whether to speak. He wanted to say he was sorry. He wanted to say he didn't know. He wanted to say he would do anything. Claire didn't look up when she spoke. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a while," she said. The sentence wasn't dramatic. It wasn't delivered with anger. It was said like a truth she had already made peace with. Evan's throat tightened. "For how long?" he asked. Claire exhaled slowly. "I don't know," she said. "I just can't be here right now." Evan nodded, pretending he understood, even though the part of him that still clung to normal life wanted to bargain. Claire finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, but they were clear. "I can't be quiet anymore," she said. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a speech. It was a confession. And in that moment, Evan understood what she really meant. Quiet wasn't just a personality trait. It wasn't just how he spoke. It was how he lived. It was how he avoided. How he delayed. How he waited for problems to solve themselves. Claire couldn't live inside that kind of quiet now. Not after seeing what it cost. Not after hearing their daughter breathe through machines. Not after realizing that silence wasn't peace, it was permission. Claire packed a small bag. She didn't take everything. She didn't strip the house bare. She moved calmly, folding clothes, zipping a suitcase, checking her phone for her sister's address like she was leaving for a work trip. That calmness broke Evan more than tears would have. At the door, Claire paused. For a second, Evan thought she might turn back, might soften, might say something that made it feel temporary. Instead, she touched the doorframe lightly, as if saying goodbye to a version of her life she no longer recognized. Then she left. Evan stayed in the house alone. Same street. Same lawns. Same polite nods from neighbors who now looked at him differently, as if tragedy had marked him with a subtle stain. The porch light still turned on at 7 p.m., perfectly on time. The refrigerator still hummed. The dishwasher still clicked and whirred. Everything kept functioning. But the house no longer felt safe. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It didn't feel like stability. It didn't feel like maturity. It felt like a room where something terrible had happened, and the air remembered. Evan sat on the couch most nights with the television on mute, watching faces move without sound. He listened instead to the quiet between the walls, the quiet he had built his life around. And for the first time, he heard what it really was. Not peace, not safety, but absence. Same street, same lawns, same silence, but now it sounded different. Evan once believed staying out of it made him a good father. He was wrong. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in a family is not anger. It's the silence that teaches everyone no one will step in. And once that lesson is learned, it's never forgotten. Silence doesn't protect families. It protects the moment before everything breaks.